You know what no one tells you about invisibility? It's not that you disappeared, it's that you're standing right there, fully present, breathing, speaking, existing, and they've chosen not to look. That's the violence of it. That's the particular cruelty that hollows you out from the inside. There's a specific ache to being unseen. It's not loneliness is when you're alone. This is different. This is standing in a crowded room, contributing to a conversation, and watching your words evaporate before they reach anyone's ears. This is entering a space and feeling the atmosphere. Remain unchanged, as if you're made of air. This is the exhausting mathematics of wondering whether you actually exist, or whether you somehow become a ghost without the mercy of actually dying first. The pain of being invisible isn't dramatic. No one writes elegies about it. It doesn't announce itself with catastrophe or crisis. It accumulates, day after day, moment after moment, in the small erasures that seem too petty to name, but carve you hollow nonetheless. The meeting where your idea is ignored until someone else says it loud. The gathering where conversations rearrange themselves around you like water flowing past a stone. The relationships where you're always the one reaching out, always the one remembering, always the one who cares more. And here's what makes it unbearable. You can't prove it. You can't point to invisibility the way you can point to a wound. People will tell you you're being sensitive, imagining things, making it up. They'll say you're paranoid or needy or desperate for attention, and maybe you start to believe them. Maybe you start to think the problem is you're not interesting enough, not valuable enough, not enough of anything to deserve being seen. That's where the shame blooms, in that gap between knowing you're there and wondering why no one else seems to notice. You start cataloging your deficiencies. Too quiet, too loud, too much, not enough. Wrong shape, wrong voice, wrong way of moving through the world. You convince yourself that invisibility is a verdict on your worth, rather than a statement about others' capacity to see. Being rejected, that's almost easier, isn't it? Rejection at least confirms you're real enough to be turned away. Rejection says, I see you, and I'm choosing to say no. There's a terrible dignity in that. But invisibility says, I'm not choosing anything about you because I haven't registered your existence in the first place. You don't even rise to the level of rejection. You're simply absent from the equation, the exhaustion of it, the bone-deep weariness of trying to matter. You find yourself performing, constantly calculating how to be seen. Maybe if you're funnier, maybe if you're quieter, maybe if you're more helpful, more accommodating, more willing to shrink yourself into whatever shape might finally catch someone's eye. You become a contortionist of the self, twisting into configurations that might earn you visibility. And it works sometimes. Someone notices, someone sees. But here's the trap. They're not seeing you. They're seeing the performance. They're seeing the version you've constructed, the mask you've worn, the self you've offered up, because you thought that's what it would take. So even when you're visible, you're still invisible. The real you remains unseen because you've learned that the real you isn't enough. We tell ourselves lies to survive invisibility. We say, I don't care about being seen. We say, I prefer being alone anyway. We say, people are superficial and I'm above needing their validation. We build entire philosophies around not mattering. Call it independence, call it self-sufficiency, call it anything but. What it is, protection against the pain of being overlooked again. The bargain we strike is brutal. Perform, produce, prove your worth through achievement, through service, through making yourself useful. Maybe then, maybe if you're valuable enough, indispensable enough, maybe then they'll have to see you. So you become the one who always helps, always shows up, always goes above and beyond. You make yourself necessary because being wanted for what you do feels close enough to being seen for who you are. But it's never enough, is it? The goalposts move. The standards shift. You achieve and achieve and achieve, and still you feel that familiar absence, that sense of speaking into a void, because you're trying to earn something that should never require earning. You're auditioning for a role in your own life, and the auditioning for a role in your own life, and the audition never ends. What happens when we confuse our worth with others' attention? We become hollow. We lose track of who we are beneath all the performing. We forget what we actually want because we've spent so long trying to figure out what might make us visible. Our desires become twisted around the desire to be desired, to be seen, to matter in someone else's eyes. And here's the confusion: we blame ourselves for others' blindness. We take responsibility for their inability or unwillingness to see. We make their limitation our failing. Someone talks over you and you think, I should have spoken more clearly. Someone forgets you and you think, I should have been more memorable. Someone dismisses you and you think, I should have been more valuable. But their blindness is not your fault. Read that again. Their refusal to see you, their inability to recognize your presence, their habit of looking past you, that's on them, that's their poverty, their limitation, their choice. You are not invisible because you're inadequate. You're invisible because they're not looking. Still, we carry the weight. We internalize the invisibility until it becomes identity. We start to believe we're the kind of person who doesn't get seen, doesn't get chosen, doesn't get remembered. We make it a fact about ourselves rather than a fact about the moment, the relationship, the dynamic. We say, I'm forgettable. I'm easy to overlook. I'm not the kind of person people notice. And once invisibility becomes identity, once we wear it like a second skin, something strange happens. We start to need it. We start to hide behind it. We claim we want to be seen while simultaneously doing everything we can to remain hidden because there's a seduction to invisibility, isn't there? A dark comfort. When you're invisible, you're safe. When you're invisible, you can't be criticized, can't be rejected, can't be hurt, at least not in the ways that feel most dangerous. When you're invisible, you don't have to risk being seen fully and found wanting. You don't have to expose your flaws, your failures, your fears. You don't have to let anyone close enough to discover you're not what they hoped. Invisibility becomes refuge. It becomes the familiar pain we choose over the unknown terror of exposure. We know how to be overlooked. We've mastered it. We've built our lives around it. Stepping into visibility means abandoning everything we know about how to survive. It means risking everything we've been protecting. What are we protecting? Our imperfections, our ordinariness, our humanity. We're terrified that if people really saw us, not the performance, not the mask, but the actual messy reality of who we are, they'd be disappointed. They'd turn away. They confirm every fear we've ever had about our inadequacy. So we stay small, we stay hidden. We claim we're invisible while actively choosing invisibility because the alternative is too frightening. We want to be seen, but only if being seen comes with guarantees. Only if being seen means being celebrated, accepted, loved exactly as we are. And since we can't guarantee that, we stay in shadows and call it safety. The grief in this is profound. The grief of realizing that we've been hiding from ourselves most of all. That we've been so afraid of others not seeing us that we stopped seeing ourselves. We became so focused on being visible to them that we made ourselves invisible to us. But here's what invisibility teaches, if we let it. Here's the wisdom available only in the margins, only in the spaces where no one's watching. When you're invisible, you see things clearly. You see how people really are when they think no one's judging. You see the performance they put on and the truth beneath it. You see the hierarchies, the patterns, the ways people use and discard each other. You see the machinery of social life without the distortion of being part of it. You learn about people when they think you're not watching. You learn who's kind when kindness isn't rewarded. You learn who's cruel when cruelty goes unpunished. You learn who's real and who's performing, who's genuine and who's calculating, who sees people as people and who sees them as props in their own story. Being underestimated gives you a kind of power. People reveal themselves around you. They show you what they really think, what they really value, who they really are. They don't bother hiding because they don't think you matter enough to judge them. And in that carelessness, they tell you everything. Invisibility strips away performance. When no one's watching, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to be impressive or entertaining or valuable. You can just be. You can discover who you are when you're not trying to be seen, when you're not shaping yourself to fit someone else's expectations. And this is where invisibility becomes a question rather than just a wound. Who are you when no one's looking? What do you want when it's not for applause? What do you value when no one's there to validate your values? What brings you alive when aliveness won't be witnessed or rewarded? These questions cut to the bone. They reveal whether we have a self beneath all the performance, whether we exist independently of others' perception, whether we've built anything real, or just a hall of mirrors reflecting back what we think others want to see. The invisible know themselves in ways the constantly visible never can. They know what they think without the static of others' opinions. They know what they feel without the distortion of performing those feelings. They know who they are because they've had to be themselves when being themselves earned them nothing. There's a freedom in not being seen. A terrible freedom, yes, one you wouldn't choose but freedom nonetheless. When you're invisible, you can't hide behind others' validation. You can't define yourself by their approval. You can't measure your worth by their attention. You have to find another way. You have to look inward. Even when looking inward reveals emptiness, even when looking inward hurts, the invisible often see most clearly because they've had to. They've had to develop a self that exists apart from social confirmation. They've had to find meaning that doesn't depend on being noticed. They've had to build an inner life rich enough to sustain them through the outer life's neglect. But we need to talk about the other side. We need to talk about the violence we commit. Because if you've been invisible, you know the pain of it. And knowing that pain, you also know how often you've inflicted it on others. How many people have you made invisible? How many times have you looked past someone, talked over them, forgotten them, dismissed them? How many times have you been too busy, too distracted, too focused on yourself to actually see the person in front of you? We do it constantly. We walk past people and don't see them. We interact with people and don't register them. We use people take their labor, their service, their care, and never acknowledge them as fully human. We make people invisible and call it normal. We call it busy. We call it life. The server at the restaurant, the person who cleans your office, the colleague who does the background work that makes you look good, the friend who always listens but never gets asked how they are, the family member you categorized and stopped actually seeing. We make them invisible through our inattention, our assumptions, our refusal to look closely. Why do we do this? Why do we refuse to see? Sometimes it's thoughtlessness. We're too caught up in our own experience to register anyone else's. Sometimes it's self-protection, seeing others fully would require something from us, would demand our care, our response, our recognition. Sometimes it's power. Making someone invisible is a way of asserting dominance, of reminding them and ourselves of their supposed unimportance. We're threatened by people we can't categorize, people who don't fit our expectations, people who complicate our worldview. So we make them invisible. We refuse to see them because seeing them would require us to change, to expand, to question our certainties. It's easier to look away. Looking away becomes a weapon. It's violence disguised as neutrality. We pretend we're just minding our business, just staying in our lane, just not getting involved. But invisibility is never neutral. When you refuse to see someone, you're making a choice. You're choosing your comfort over their dignity. You're choosing your convenience over their humanity. And here's what we lose when we refuse to see. Everything. We lose connection, depth, truth, growth. We lose the opportunity to be changed by encounters with people different from us. We lose the richness that comes from actually paying attention. We lose our own humanity because humanity is relational. We become human by recognizing the humanity in others. When we make people invisible, we diminish ourselves. We shrink our world. We live in a hall of mirrors where we only see reflections of what we already know, what we already are. We become isolated, impoverished, small. So what do? How do we move from invisibility to visibility, both being seen and doing the work of seeing? It starts with seeing yourself, not the performance you've constructed, not the version you think others want, but the actual you, the flawed, complicated, contradictory, beautiful, broken, whole you. You have to look at yourself with the attention you've been craving from others. You have to see yourself clearly, honestly, without flinching. This is harder than it sounds. We're experts at self-deception. We're skilled at looking away from ourselves, at avoiding the mirrors that might reflect something we don't want to see. We've spent so long performing that we don't know who we are when we're not performing. But seeing yourself, really seeing yourself, is the foundation of everything else. Because you can't step into visibility if you don't know what you're making visible. You can't show up as yourself if you don't know who yourself is. You can't demand to be seen if you're not willing to see. And seeing yourself means accepting yourself, not in some shallow self-help way where you pretend your flaws don't exist, but in the deeper way of recognizing that your flaws exist and you're still worthy. You're still deserving of being seen. You're still valuable, not despite your imperfections, but including them. This is the courage visibility requires. Not the courage to be perfect. The courage to be imperfect and visible anyway. The courage to step into light when you've learned darkness. When darkness feels safer. When you know that light reveals everything. Visibility is not about performance. Read that again. Visibility is not about making yourself impressive or entertaining or valuable enough to deserve attention. Visibility is about presence. It's about inhabiting your own life fully, about existing without apology, about taking up space you've been conditioned to believe you don't deserve. There's a difference between being noticed and being known. Being noticed is about surface how you look, what you do, how you perform. Being known is about depth, who you are, beneath the performance, what you feel, what you fear, what you hope. We often confuse the two. We chase being noticed and call it visibility. We want the validation, the attention, the confirmation that we exist. But being noticed is fleeting. It's based on externals that shift and change. You can be noticed constantly and still feel invisible because no one actually knows you. Being known requires something different. It requires you to stop performing and start revealing. It requires you to risk letting people see past the mask to the face beneath. It requires you to trust that you're enough, that the unperformed version of you is worth knowing. And here's the paradox. True visibility demands you stop trying to be visible. It demands you stop calculating how to be seen and just exist. It demands you show up as yourself, not the version you've curated, not the image you've crafted, but the actual messy reality of who you are. This means showing your uncertainty, your confusion, your contradictions, your failures, your humanity. It means saying, this is me, flaws and all, and I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to shrink anymore. I'm not going to apologize for taking up space anymore. The risk of being seen fully, of letting people see your flaws, your struggles, your ordinariness, is that they might reject you. They might turn away. They might confirm your worst fears about yourself. But here's the thing. If they reject the real you, they weren't meant for you anyway. Their rejection is information, not verdict. It tells you where you don't belong, which is just as valuable as knowing where you do. And the alternative, hiding yourself to maintain connections that aren't real, is slow death. It's invisibility by choice. It's invisibility by choice. It's the pain you know, masquerading as safety. Refusing invisibility doesn't mean begging for attention. It doesn't mean performing louder or trying harder to be noticed. It means existing unapologetically. It means speaking your truth even when no one asks. It means taking up space even when you haven't been invited. It means living as if your presence matters because it does, regardless of whether anyone else recognizes it. There's a quiet power in simply existing, not proving, not performing, just being. Being yourself fully, completely, without apology or explanation. Being present in your own life rather than waiting for permission to show up. Being visible to yourself even when others refuse to see. This is the shift. From seeking visibility as validation to claiming visibility as birthright. From asking to be seen to refusing to be unseen. From performing your worth to simply existing with worth. From invisibility as wound to visibility as choice. And when you make this shift, when you see yourself and choose to be seen, something changes. You stop tolerating relationships where you're invisible. You stop shrinking yourself to fit spaces that won't hold you. You stop performing for people who will truly see. You create space for connections where mutual seeing is possible, where both people show up fully and recognize each other's presence. You also start seeing others differently. You start noticing the invisible people around you, the ones you've been looking past, the ones you've been taking for granted, the ones you've been making small through your inattention. You start seeing them because you remember what it feels like not to be seen. You start recognizing them because you've learned that recognition is sacred. Invisibility was never about your worth. Let that land. Your invisibility, the times you've been overlooked, forgotten, dismissed, was never a verdict on your value. It was a statement about others' capacity to see, about the limitations of their attention, about their choices and failures, not yours. You were always worthy of being seen. You were always deserving of recognition, presence, attention. The fact that others didn't see you doesn't diminish you. It reveals that their blindness is their poverty, not your inadequacy. But here's what you can control. You can see yourself. You can recognize your own presence. You can acknowledge your own worth. You can refuse to disappear just because others aren't looking. You can be visible to yourself even when the world makes you invisible. And from that foundation, from a ground of seeing yourself, you can step into visibility without needing it to validate you. You can be seen without being desperate to be seen. You can exist fully without requiring others' confirmation that you exist. Being seen begins with refusing to disappear. It begins with choosing presence over protection, truth over performance, reality over masks. It begins with the radical act of existing as yourself. Fully yourself in a world that would prefer you to shrink. Visibility is not a gift others grant. It's a choice you make about how fully you'll inhabit your own life. It's a decision to show up, speak up, take up space. It's a commitment to your own presence, regardless of who else notices or cares. You've been invisible long enough. You've hidden long enough. You've performed and shrunk and apologized and disappeared long enough. And maybe the world hasn't noticed. Maybe the people around you still don't see. Maybe you're still waiting for that moment when someone finally recognizes you. But you don't have to wait. You can see yourself now. You can claim your own presence now. You can step into the light now. Not because you've earned it or because you're finally good enough, but because you're here, because you exist, because your presence is its own justification. The pain of being invisible taught you something. You're stronger than you knew. You survived being unseen and you're still here. You endured erasure and you're still yourself. You walk through the world like a ghost and you're still real. Now take that strength and choose differently. Choose to be seen. Choose to see. Choose presence, yours and others. Choose visibility, not as performance, but as power, the quiet power of existing fully, of refusing to shrink, of inhabiting your life as if you belong in it. Because you do. You belong. Your presence matters. You are already enough. And whether or not anyone else sees you, you can see yourself. And that's where it begins. That's where everything begins.